This episode is brought to you by MindHappy. We all spend way too much time in front of screens. I know I do, and I find myself craving creative yet restful analog activity. I never thought I would long for the downtime of my childhood in the 90s making friendship bracelets at summer camp. This is why we were so excited when we discovered Mind Happy. Mind Happy is a lifestyle and wellness brand centered on thoughtful creativity to help people craft fulfilling moments, connections, and self care rituals through purposeful play. Mind Happy provides curated monthly deliveries that promote phone free activities like knitting, coloring, and crafting. They believe that play is one of the most effective ways to relax and re energize in our daily lives.
MindHappy's founder is an ex-Amazon executive who leveraged similar activities to alleviate her own burnout. All the phone-free activities from music box building to coloring are selected based on science, restoring mental clarity, energizing connections, reducing anxiety, and facilitating fulfilling moments. It is curated monthly self-care delivered right to your door. We love that the products from each box are primarily sourced from small women-owned business. For 15% off your first month subscription, go to mindhappy.com. That's MindHappy.com and use code COURAGE15 at checkout.
Welcome to Courageous Wellness. My name is Erica Stein.
And I'm Allie French, and this is a podcast about individual journeys within wellness and how to navigate it all.
After Allie experienced a cancer diagnosis in her 20s,
and Erica went through a self-love journey, we created a platform to interview real people from all walks of life that have combined all types of practices. From physical wellness to emotional and spiritual, we hear courageous stories and focus on why it's important to share them.
We are both certified integrative nutrition health coaches, and together with our community are learning to live our most purposeful lives by sharing one courageous story at a time.
It takes courage to share these journeys, and by talking about them, we aim to destigmatize the process. We want you to be your own health advocate, feel educated and informed on the latest in health and wellness, and empower you to feel your absolute best.
And because we want to bring forth a wide variety of stories, the opinions of our guests do not necessarily reflect our own, but we hope the diverse and varied stories will empower you to make the best choices for your own life. So join us as we and our community share our courageous wellness.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Courageous Wellness. We have a great episode for you this week with guest Kuzmič, and we are going to get into it in just a minute. But right now, I just wanted to let you know that it's just me doing the intro this week. Erica is with her husband and family, and they are in Florida supporting her father-in-law, who's unfortunately at the end of his battle with Alzheimer's. Erica and I recently did a mini episode, all about family illness and grief and dealing with those kinds of difficult times. And so we just want to send her and her whole family all of our best, lots of love and support. We miss you, and we're just sending you guys all the good vibes for this time. And we'll see you when you get back. And I'm not going to spend too much time on this intro because we have such a good conversation with Christina. I just want to remind everybody that we are starting to implement some Monday solo episodes. We're going to be doing some coaching episodes. We're going to be doing some catch-ups, as we recently did on that one with grief and illness. We did one on blood sugar balance recently. We won't have them this week and next week, but we will start continuing them more frequently. So keep an eye out for those. And then, of course, every Wednesday, you can find our normal programming with our wonderful and distinguished guests. So let's get into Christina's intro. After immigrating from a war-torn country, world-renowned speaker Kristian Kuzmič went from being a single mom living on food stamps to supporting her child through severe depression. She's been lucky enough to thrive on social media, juggling all of life's challenges and encouraging her audience to prioritize their mental health. She's quickly become a viral sensation with 2.9 million Facebook followers and well over 600,000 Instagram followers. Even as the platforms evolve, her message continues to resonate with parents who need to hear that it's okay to be less than perfect. Yet she never expected to be the mom crying on the bathroom floor, gobsmacked and with the rug pulled out from under her, calling the police to help her keep her spiraling son safe. But that's what happened. Even with all of her exposure to parenting do's and don'ts, even with her dedication to being a present parent, when disaster strikes, the most prepared of us wind up humbled, scrambling, and sometimes in a free fall. So in her new book, I Can Fix This, and Other Lies I Told Myself While Parenting My Struggling Child, Christina shares what she learned the year her son's life seemed to unravel. These revelations helped her not only bear witness to his journey to healing, but transform the way she talks and thinks about parenting, and showed her the unhealed wounds in herself that must be addressed. We have a powerful conversation about her journey today, her experience dealing with her son's depression and addiction, how she navigated everything, and ended up writing a book with the support of her son on the other side of some of the most turbulent years. We really gained so much from this conversation with Christina. We appreciate so much her vulnerability and openness. Enjoy the episode.
This episode is brought to you by Sprout Living. One of our favorite new snacks are Sprout Living's probiotic almonds. Wildly delicious and irresistibly crunchy, these are the perfect gut-healthy balanced snack. Each pack of the sprouted and activated organic almonds contain 10 billion CFUs of probiotics, 6 grams of clean plant protein, and a variety of other superfood spices and herbs that do the body good.
They're made without seed oils, which we all know are out, and the flavors. The Italian truffle is delicious, and the dairy-free cheddar cheese made with turmeric and nutritional yeast always hits the spot. Honestly, we may never have another chip again. Sprout Living also makes our favorite plant-based protein blends. My personal favorite is the coffee flavor.
If you want to try Sprout Living, you can save 20% off your entire order by using code COURAGEOUS at checkout. Visit www.sproutliving.com and use code COURAGEOUS to save 20%. Give them a try and let us know if you love them as much as we do. You can also find the direct links in our show notes. So welcome, Christina. We are very excited to have this conversation with you today. And to get us started, we always like to start with our guest's background and personal journey to the work that they do. So can you share with us and our listeners, how did you get here? What is your background and the journey that led you to writing this book?
Well, I actually started writing and creating videos and all that because I was a single mom years ago. I'd gone through an awful divorce and I was on food stamps and sleeping on the floor next to my kids' bunk beds, had no money, and just sunk into a depression and felt like a loser and like my kids deserve better. And so once life got better, I sort of set this goal for myself where I wanted to be for others what I needed when I was at my lowest. And so all my early content and my first book were really about, encouraging moms and, helping moms give themselves more grace and less criticism and all that. And then, when my oldest son turned like 13, I started seeing some changes in him. I thought it was just typical teenage hormones. But eventually, we found out that he had really deep depression. He had suicidal ideations. And that led me on this whole new journey that I never thought would turn into a book, because I never thought we would share something so personal. I never thought he would be open to sharing something so personal. But it's interesting how even through all this, now the point of the second book is still sort of goes with that goal of I want to be for others what I needed when I was at my lowest. So that's
Thank you for sharing that. And yeah, it's remarkable, as we've been reading the book and even seeing, I think you did a video that you shared with your son, which was remarkable and I think really brave too, that he chose to participate and wanted to share that too, because the vulnerability in it all, I think I'm sure is helping a lot of people. And something that really struck me. So Your book, let's tell our listeners, is called I Can Fix This and Other Lies I Told Myself While Parenting My Struggling Child. And what I was going to say is starting off with the doctor that wrote the foreword.
Mm.
I'm not a parent, but I'm a step parent of a teenager. And I really, really kind of clicked into sort of the parenting culture she was describing of this generation and this like kind of unrelenting pressure that I think sometimes we feel to put on ourselves and then ultimately on our children, or the children bear the brunt of that. And so before this, I guess where I'd like to start is before this experience with your son, what was your sort of approach or feeling? Did you fall into that where you felt like, it's your job for your children to be an extension of you, and if there's something going wrong with them, then it's sort of like a personalized failure on the parents' part? Like, what was your own sort of relationship with how you felt about parenting?
You know what's funny about that is I actually thought I was doing a great job at not doing that. Like I really was convinced that I was doing a good job because I was raised very much where I had to get certain kind of grades and I had to behave a certain way. And so I was like, I'm not going to be that kind of parent. And so I very much did my very best to put my ego in the back. I actually have a chapter in my first book that's Kids First, Ego Last. And it was something I'd written on a post, like a bunch of post-its, and put it all over my house when I, was going through a hard time with my kids when they were little, because I just wanted to remind myself, this isn't about you. Let them be who they are. So I thought I was actually doing a great job. And I think that's the thing with parenting. Sometimes we think we're really thriving in an area until we get a bomb thrown our way that is so unfamiliar. And we're like, oh crap, I'm actually not thriving this. Which is very human, right? We're never going to reach that perfection in any area of our life. But it just really put a spotlight on all the areas where I still needed to work. And what I love about Dr. Shefali Sabari, who's the one that you mentioned that wrote the foreword, her work was so influential in my life because she talks so much about not being enmeshed and sort of separating who you are and your value from who your kids are and their behavior, and how unhealthy it is for our kids and ourselves if we're constantly, too attached in that way. So it was just so crazy. A few years ago, my son was doing a little better at the time, but I get this random email from her asking me to speak at her conference. And I was like, what? How does she even know who I am? I thought it was spam mail. And so it was just, I remember sitting in that conference because I spoke, but then I was like, I want to also, participate and listen to every word. And I remember sitting there and she was talking and I started crying and I was like, she is the one that needs to write this forward, because people will see when they read the forward in my book, but it is exactly the stuff I needed to learn to be the best support system for my son.
Yeah. What I think is so just magnificent about your journey, and I think really relatable, is, as you mentioned, when you talked about your journey, you were a single mom, you were on food stamps, and you created this platform and you've really helped so many other people, right, be, like you said, what you wanted or needed at that time. And as you mentioned, you have all these resources, and then life throws you that curveball, right, that you never expected to have this moment, right? I think, when I was reading and researching you for the episode, I think it says you never expected to be the mom crying on the bathroom floor, gobsmacked, and with the rug pulled out from under her. And, I think whether you're listening and you're a parent and you're in those trenches, or you're listening and maybe you're not, I think every person can relate to having just life's curveballs
Yeah.
being thrown at you. And I think I'm curious how that felt, how that felt to have that moment where you were like, but I didn't think this was going to happen. I have all these tools in my toolkit. And I think there's also, there's definitely a resilience factor. I'm somebody who's, my family was food insecure when I was growing up. I've been through so many different iterations of my own life. And so sometimes when that really big curveball comes, for me, this last few years, it's been with family health episodes. It can feel extra hard, I think, because you're like, but I thought I thought I leveled up here. I thought I
Yes.
did this. Allie and I are Buddhists, right? I thought I changed this karmic tendency, right? But dang, here it is again. And now, right, with your child or with family health, whatever
Yeah.
it may be. So I'm just curious how you were able to really face that and keep going for your son and what that kind of process was like.
I mean, I was a little naive because I thought, okay, I went through this period where I was almost homeless and like life was just so awful and hard. And I think I've been through the worst of it. Like I'm not, I know that life will still be hard, but that was my like the bad part, right? If somebody wrote a biography about me, that would be my darkest hours. And then when this stuff happened with my son, it was so much harder actually. And I didn't think I could go through anything harder, but it's so much harder because it's not me who's suffering. I mean, obviously I'm suffering because my child is suffering, but he's the one who's suffering. He's suicidal. And I'm on the sidelines at first thinking, okay, I got this. I got this. I can handle this. I've struggled mental health. I know him. I understand teenagers. I got this. And then realizing, oh my God, I am completely helpless. This is completely out of my control. Or again, when something is happening to us, right? We do have some control. We can control how we see ourselves, how we behave, the choices we make, the help we get, who we reach out to, blah, blah, blah. With him, and that's why the book is called I Can Fix This, because I think every parent, or even if you're not a parent, just trying to support a loved one, you really convince yourself that there's something you can do to make it better. And then as every new thing I tried didn't work, you start to question yourself and you start to feel inadequate. And what's wrong with me that I don't know how to parent my child? And I mean, it was just, it was so much harder than what I already thought were my hardest days. And it was also hard because, well, it's interesting. It was hard and therapeutic to continue to do my job because at the time, like when we were going through the worst of it, my first book is about to come out. I'm on a tour that I'm contractually obligated to complete. I can't cancel my tour. And my whole tour show and my book and my videos are all geared toward encouraging other moms. And I'm filming these videos, and so many times my face was puffy and my eyes were red from crying the night before. And I actually got a bunch of hate comments of like, what's wrong with your face? And these people don't even know, what I'm going through at the time. And so I'm, posting these funny videos and then literally shutting myself in my closet and bawling. And so in some ways it was like, God, it's like I'm living these two different worlds. And in other ways I found it there. Sorry, I'm totally going off on a different tangent, but
no, this is it reminds me too of Glennon Doyle, right? When she
yes.
realized she was going through her divorce and her book about
yes.
it just reminds me of that. I think that's so poetic, honestly.
Exactly.
So yes, please continue because I'm soaking this all in.
But it was so therapeutic, and I actually kind of touched on it in this I Can Fix This book about how I would write something, I would post a video and I would go for whoever needs to hear it. And as I'm posting, I'm going, oh, I'm the whoever. And, I remember doing my tour and breaking down, like I would break down on stage during certain parts that I never used to get teary-eyed during. But now it was like, I'm hearing my own advice and my own tips in a different way. And, there's so many things that I would say to moms to encourage them that I needed to hear now. And sometimes it's really hard to take your own advice, Sometimes it's really hard to give yourself more credit than criticism and more grace than judgment when your son is suicidal and you don't know how to help him. So it was hard and it was therapeutic. And I never, ever, ever at the time thought that we would ever put this out there because I have a very strict rule with my kids. I will not post anything about them without their permission, not even a family Christmas photo unless everybody approves. And so never in my wildest dreams, I think my son would be like, hey, let's talk about this publicly.
Erica and I are always encouraging our coaching clients to drink more water because we all know it's important to stay hydrated and healthy. In fact, 60% of our bodies are made of water, but if you're like me, you probably don't always trust your tap water. Having safe, clean water is the last thing you want to worry about, but unfortunately, according to extensive research by the Environmental Working Group, 3 out of 4 homes in America have harmful contaminants in their tap water. Long-term exposure to high concentration of PFAS can potentially lead to adverse health effects like cancer, endocrine system disruption, and liver toxicity, which is why I'm glad that AquaTrue removes PFAS. Also, the filters for AquaTrue are affordable and long-lasting. You don't have to change filters every 2 to 3 months. AquaTrue filters last from 6 months to 2 years. Just one set of filters from their classic purifier makes the equivalent of 4,500 bottles of water. That's less than 3 cents a bottle, plus it's way more environmentally friendly. It's even portable, making it perfect for renters or if you're going off to college, for your dorm room. I could go on about what I love about AquaTrue, but the last thing I'll say is it makes my coffee taste so much better too, which is a key part of my morning routine and also starting the day off on the right foot. First hydration, then coffee. AquaTrue comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee and even makes a great gift. Today, our listeners receive 20% off AquaTrue Purifier. Just go to aquatrue.com. That's AQUATRU.com and enter code CWPOD at checkout. That's 20% off any AquaTrue water purifier when you go to aquatrue.com and use code CWPOD at checkout. There's this moment in the book, and obviously like everybody should go read it because it's hard to encapsulate all that the details in which you kind of explain this experience and the sort of timeline of it all as well. But I just stuck out to me was when you were talking about questions, like the way assumptions versus curiosity, I think it was. And that really resonated with me, where it's like just because you put a question mark on the end of a sentence when you're talking to your kid doesn't mean it's actually like expressing curiosity. And I think there was like this moment, which I'd love you to share about a little bit when your questions actually started becoming curious and so honest too. And I think I was wondering, like, maybe sometimes we put the question marks on the end of the assumptions because we're afraid of the honest answer. And so, but there was I just felt it was like a really brave moment. I think you guys were in the car, at least that's the image in my mind, where you asked him, do you think about hurting yourself? And he answered honestly. And there was like this honest moment that was sort of a bit of a breakthrough. And it really resonated with me. So I was just wondering if you could share what the difference of the way you shifted from the assumption questions to the real curiosity questions in the process with your son.
Yeah, I found myself doing what I think every parent has done, where I would ask questions like, you used to have such good grades. What happened now that your grades aren't good? And I'm thinking, I'm throwing him a compliment, right? You used to do so good. Or what can I do to help you get off this dangerous path you're on? And they all sound like normal questions. But if you think about it, all those questions were screaming, you're not good enough. And so no wonder our teenagers shut down. I wasn't coming from a place of curiosity. I was coming from a place of assumption. And a lot of times, because of my own frustration trying to raise a teenager, I was coming from a place of judgment without even realizing it. And I remember hearing my friend Jason, and I mentioned him in the book, saying that the most beautiful thing you can do for someone, I'm getting teary-eyed just saying this, is stand in awe of their story. And it hit me. I wasn't standing in awe of my son's story. So when I realized that he was depressed, and I just told myself, you are only allowed to ask. You're not allowed to assume. You're not allowed to jump in and fix. Just ask. Just ask, and then shut up and listen. And I asked him, have you ever thought about hurting yourself? And he said, yes. And I write in the book how I felt like an emotional bodyguard was like behind me going, okay, that's enough questions for today. Don't ask anymore. Don't go there. But I decided to, push through. And I said, and when you've had those thoughts, is it because you want to die? And he said, sometimes, yes. And then I kept going, even though everything inside me was like, you don't want to know this. Let's talk about something lighter. Or jump in and go, oh no, And I said, have you ever tried? And he said, not yet. And I just remember hearing the word yet. And it was like somebody, I can't even explain it. My mind just sort of went blank. And then what I had to learn, and this was really hard for me, but it has served me well in all the years since, is I think a mother's instinct is to immediately go, no, 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 you don't really mean that. You don't want to hurt yourself. Look at all the good you have in your life, right? We want to make it better. We want to kiss the boo-boo, right? We want to put a positive thought and turn their mind differently. And what I realized in that moment is if I do that, if I say, no, 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 you don't really want to hurt yourself, just be thankful, blah, blah, blah. What I'm saying to him is that when he tells me, I feel this, Mom, I am telling him, no, you don't really feel this. And if I'm telling him, no, you don't really feel this, why would he ever open up to me again? So I realized I have to validate his experience, not jump in to fix it, not make assumptions. I need to stand in awe of his story, no matter how sad and painful that story is to me.
Yeah.
And so I didn't jump in to try to fix it. And instead, I just validated him and said, I'm so sorry you feel this way. I'm so sorry I didn't know before. Let's figure out together, how to get you help. But that was really important because, can I go on?
Yes, please. Oh, yes. So like I said, we're just soaking it all in.
Well, later on in the book, I write about how, and by the way, later on in the book, I had to make a lot of mistakes. Okay. By the time I got to this point, I'm very honest in the book about the fact that I was clueless. But later on in the book, after I learned a lot of lessons, I write about how I was passing him in the hall in our house and I saw something that struck me and I lifted his sleeve up and I noticed that he was cutting himself, which is so heartbreaking for Mom to see. And this is after he had already been in a psychiatric hospital. He had been in a residential treatment center. He had therapists. He was on medication. I threw everything I could at him to help. And I remember everything inside me just wanted to go, what are you doing? You can't do that, And instead, stayed calm. I said, I'm going to grab some Bactine and I'll meet you in your bedroom, okay? And I remember cleaning his bloody arms. And again, everything inside me wants to passionately tell him why he shouldn't do this and how much I love him and that he's scaring me. And instead, I just very calmly, and I had to keep reminding myself, take a breath, speak calmly, slow your voice down. I said, how did it feel, Luca? Did it take away your depression? And he said, no. And I said, okay, so how about this? Let's decide that you tried it and it didn't help. So next time you're trying to find a way to numb your depression, how about talk to me first or call a friend and let's figure out a different way. And it was like this beautiful, calm, non-chaotic conversation I had with my son in a moment that could have been full of fear and chaos and which only would have made him withdraw.
Yeah.
And instead, not only did it give us this calm moment, he never cut again. And the next time he did, one thing he did a lot is he would punch tile walls, like tile in his bathroom, and his knuckles would get bloody. He would actually come and tell me because he wasn't worried that I was going to freak out, which no human wants, right? To get that reaction when they're in pain. So it was just learning again, stand in awe of his story. Don't jump on him for cutting himself. Don't immediately jump with assumption or judgment or whatever. Just stand in awe of this moment that he is having and see how you can best support him through it. And that's a really freaking hard thing for parents to do.
Incredible.
It's really hard.
Yeah. Yeah. That's just, I think Allie and I are both were seeing your story. You're so what you have been able to do and share, and everybody should watch. We'll definitely link it in the show notes of this episode, but you and your son have a video together where you talk about this journey that you've been through. And it's so powerful, to hear and read and then see where you are now. And And I think, I love control. Who doesn't? Like
Yep.
that's how I feel safe. So when, I've ever dealt with, and I think as you mentioned earlier, it is easier when it's just yourself, right? So like it is easier because you can control yourself, you can make your choices, but you can't control other people, right? And that's it's such a hard part of life, especially when you love them so much, be it your child, a parent, a sibling, think of any family member, friend, loved one. And I know children, especially, just like your heart outside of your body is how it's
Yeah.
described, right? Um, and so you mentioned too, I think when we were talking, leading into this, that changing from assumption to curiosity was pivotal here. I'm curious too if there were any other parenting myths that you maybe or parenting things that you had to change in order to go along this journey. If there was anything else kind of in that vein of assumption to curiosity that really
Yeah.
helped you deepen this connection with yourself and your son.
Yeah. So I think a lot of times the way we're raised, even if we try to do things differently, it's still like almost like a brainwashing. It's part of us. And I was raised pretty strict, and I was trying to, really be like the strict but fair parent. So like there's got to be rules and guidelines and all that. And one thing I had to learn is that a child's, I'm going to say negative behavior, whatever it is, that I really had to stop and ask myself, does this require a consequence or does this require support? Because there's a lot of things that kids do when they are struggling that parents immediately go, well, we're going to nip this behavior in the butt, and I'm going to take your cell phone, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to ground you, and blah, blah, blah. And then we're just going to make it go away. But you can't punish or intimidate or, whatever, depression. You can't. So if you're not dealing with the root of the problem, it's not only not going to get better, it's going to get worse, because there are things that we parents sometimes do, thinking we're being good parents and teaching them a lesson that can actually make them sink deeper, because we're not dealing with the root of the problem. And so, and that was really hard for me, because so depression shows up differently for different people. For my son, it showed up as rage. He would be screaming in my face, calling me an effing bitch. He would punch holes in the wall. He started using drugs. He started stealing in order to buy drugs. He was stealing pain pills from family members. I mean, it was behavior that a lot of people would look at as rebellious teenager. I mean, we need to be stricter with him. And I write about how at one point I had to call the police on him. And the police walks in the bedroom, and he had thrown a glass, and there was glass on the floor. And then my husband was trying to contain him. And in that moment, Luca started grabbing the broken pieces of glass and, hurting himself and trying to hurt my husband, Philip, his stepdad. And so the police shows up, and they see glass all over the bedroom, and they see blood, and they're like, all right, file a report. Let's, get him arrested. Let's send him to jail and press charges, whatever. And I remember sitting there and going, okay, my son needs help. So what happens when you take him to jail? Is there like a psychiatrist? Is there a therapist? There's somebody that can talk to him? They're like, nope, but it'll teach him a lesson. And it was one of those moments where I'm like, okay, hold on. I know that a lot of people would think like, this is the right thing to do. Let's teach him a lesson. He can't behave this way. But I was like, he's not going to learn the lesson. He doesn't need a consequence right now. He needs help. And so I went against everything they were saying, and nothing against the police officers. They were doing their job, and a lot of police officers aren't even trained in this area. But I just kept saying, my son needs help. I need you to take him on a psychiatric hold. And they're like, okay, kind of almost, I felt like they were talking, and maybe they weren't. Maybe it's just my insecurities were taking it as like I was being reprimanded, like you're spoiling him, But I knew that at that point, he did not need a consequence. He needed support. And he went on a psychiatric hold. He ended up in a psychiatric hospital. And, obviously it took a really long time for things to get better. But I think that's a really, really big lesson I had to learn, because I didn't want to be one of those parents who was naive and, well, my child's great and we're just going to let this one pass. And I never was that parent when they were little. I was never the parent that got a call from the school that my kid was in trouble and went to fix it. I was like, good, give him the consequence. And so having to now, and I was judged a lot for this, like, why aren't you, stricter with him? So that's a really, really, really hard thing to navigate. I still am not great at it, of how do you, when a child has mental health struggles, how do you raise them so that you're not babying them and enabling them, but yet you're not just pushing them down even, further dark path because you're being too strict and too, you know what I mean? So that was really hard. And there's a part in the book where I'm in my closet crying and I just keep saying, I don't know how to parent a child with mental illness.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what do you do when your kid won't go to school? I cannot pick up a 17-year-old kid and put him what do I do?
Right.
And having to, and what do I do when he doesn't finish his chores? Usually there would be a consequence, but how do you force someone who's in bed suicidal to do a chore? So that's a big struggle that I think every parent feels. And I don't have a perfect answer.
Well, it just shows you that, like, I think in that moment, the bedroom moment with the police, what I took from your story is like, you really trusted your wisdom in that moment. And it might have been different in a different moment, and it might be different in a future moment or whatever it might be. Like the idea of like what's babying versus what's being, strict or whatever that might be. But like in a way, you were able to tune out the pressures that the cops might have been giving in that moment, and really just like trusting your inner wisdom that like, no, he needs help and this is what's best right now in a situation that probably felt impossible. Like there's no really like great answer to dealing with something that no one's really equipped or taught how to deal with. But I think trusting yourself in that moment, and you're also, it goes back to this idea of when we mentioned like enmeshment in the beginning. It's like, I feel like one of the things I learned from you is really striking this balance. I'm sure it never felt like that, but between understanding that like your kid needed help in these really intense moments, and again, not like, and still having compassion for that. Like he needs help. I'm not going to press charges right now because I know I don't want to like teach him a lesson in jail, but like I'm sure going to the ER and then the psychiatric ward is probably sort of difficult enough.
Yeah.
It's not like that's like, oh, great, you're like on a trip to the Bahamas. It's like it's kind of awful all around. But then also having the resiliency, I don't know if resiliency is the right word, the strength to be able to even do that, like even pick up the phone to have the police come, I'm sure was incredibly difficult.
That was one of the most heartbreaking moments, because that was the first, and there were a lot after, but that was the first moment of, oh my God, how did we get here? Like never, ever, ever did I think I would be the person calling the police on my own son. Right. And then watching them handcuff him and put him in the back of a cop car. And one thing I was going to say that I had to really ask myself when making those decisions, again, back to the ego. Mm-hmm. So do I not want him to go to jail because of my ego?
Right.
Because I don't want to have a son who has a record or whatever. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And constantly having to take that out. And I remember him being put in so we were new to the neighborhood. Okay. And I didn't even know, I only knew like one neighbor at the time. So we're new to the neighborhood. Police is showing up at our house. Okay. And then I'm watching my son be put in the back of the cop car. And I see two neighbors across the street just staring and whispering to each other. And all of a sudden, all the normal human thoughts pop in my head of like, oh my gosh, what do they think? And blah, blah, blah. And I remember so clearly just saying to myself, no, thank you. And it became like a thing that I would so often through this journey have to say to myself, no, thank you. I am not picking up anybody's judgments, anybody's assumptions. I'm not picking up. And that no, thank you actually helped me make good decisions or better decisions with Luca when it came to that whole consequence versus support, right?
Yeah.
Because if you take out the worry of what will other people think, or even, well, what are other families doing? How are they handling this? If you remove all that, then you can really just focus on your child. And I think that is one of the most important things to do, is get rid of all the extra noise, and there will be a lot of it, and just focus on what your particular child needs. And your child is unique. They are different than your friend's kid who's struggling, or your other child who's struggling, their sibling. They are unique. Back to stand in the awe of their story.
Yeah.
So I think the no thank you really helps us parents,
Yeah.
make better decisions for our kids.
We recently spoke about habit stacking on the podcast. Adding small actions into our day can really have big benefits. I've been committed to seeing sunlight before blue light and taking my Seed Symbiotics with a glass of water when I wake up. Taking care of my gut supports whole body health, and I found it's a great way to start the day. I've been using Seed DS-01 Daily Symbiotic for years. Starting my day with 2 capsules is very easy, and I've noticed how it promotes my digestion and regularity. Our bodies are ecosystems, and great health starts in the gut. Erica and I are so passionate about gut health, and you can't leave a coaching session with one of us without the gut being a huge part of what we focus on. Your gut is a central hub for various pathways through the body, and a healthy gut microbiome means benefits for digestion, skin health, heart health, immune system, and more. Seed's patented capsule-in-capsule designs means the fragile bacteria can survive the journey from shipping to your door to where it works best in your body, so it doesn't need to be refrigerated. It gets to where your body really needs it, all without synthetic or chemical coatings, and it makes it a perfect probiotic to travel with. Trust your gut with Seed's DS-01 Daily Symbiotic. Go to seed.com/CWPod and use code 25CWPod to get 25% off your first month. That's 25% off your first month of Seed's DS-01 Daily Symbiotic at seed.com/CWPod, code 25CWPod. How do you continue to take care of yourself in the moments of when things feel totally out of control? I mean, how did you continue? I think there was when he was in the hospital and you kept coming back and he was being so kind of rude as light, but you know what I mean, to you, saying don't come back and don't this and that. How do you also override that and know that's not coming from his true self, but from the depression, or from how do you in those moments not get utterly sort of defeated?
Yeah, it's really hard. I mean, I don't think it comes naturally to anybody to not take it personally when your own child is screaming at you, hates you, doesn't want to see you, blames you for their, all their stuff. But it kind of goes back to when my kids were little. So quick story, the same kid, Luca, he's 4 years old. I'm broke. He's in a state-funded preschool. Okay. And they're having a Halloween parade and I have no money. I literally have no money for a Halloween costume. And so I put him in an old button-up shirt and I took a piece of cardboard and I cut out a circle and I wrote "World's #1 teacher" and I pinned it to him. And it was literally the lamest costume you've ever seen. So I go to this parade and I'm standing in the sea of parents who are all their kids are in these beautiful, lovely, awesome costumes. And I'm just stewing in my own shame. And as I'm standing there watching Luca, 4 years old, walk in the parade, I see him looking at the crowd of parents. He is searching every face. And the minute he sees me, his eyes light up and this huge smile spreads across his face. And it hit me in that moment that my kid was not searching that crowd for the perfect mom. He was just searching for me. Nothing better, nothing different, nothing more. And even at my lowest of lows, I was still needed and I was still loved. I kept thinking about that story when Luca was struggling, how all I had to do was show up. all I had to do was show up for him. I had to show up and create the worst or whatever Halloween costume. I had to show up and be there for him so he could see my face, you know? And so when he was in that emergency room, and every time I, you know, came in, he was like, get the hell out. He didn't want to see me. I just thought I don't know what to do right now. I'm clueless. I don't know how to fix this. But the one thing I know is to show up, because I need my kid to know that even when he thinks he hates me, and even when, you know, he feels and here's the truth. When they act like they hate you, they hate themselves more. That's the truth. They're taking their inner pain and they're throwing it at you. But I knew in that moment who he really hated was himself. Especially in those moments, he needed to know, I'm not giving up on you. You know deep down that you are at your lowest right now and you're at your worst. And it would probably even be more comfortable if I just turned my back on you, because we don't feel deserving of love when we are at our lowest. But I'm going to keep showing up for you. I tell a story how when we were waiting for the cops to arrive, and my husband has my son in a restraint so that he couldn't, you know, use the glass and get violent. And they're on the floor. They're basically both laying on the floor. And I got down and Luca was like screaming and crying. And I just had this thought of, I need him to know that he's loved even right now. Even while he's acting this way, I need him to know that he is loved. So I put my face down next to his and I just kept saying, I love you. And he started spitting in my face. And I didn't move. I just, as the spit was hitting my face, I just kept saying, I love you. I love you. I love you. And I think a lot of times we parents think that I love you means I condone your behavior. It doesn't. But what is the best way for any of us to heal? To know that we are loved, even with all our flaws and all our pain and all our hardships, that we are loved and that we are worthy of somebody's time and attention. So I kept showing up at that emergency room, and eventually I write in the book how I think at the third or fourth time I showed up, he said, stop showing up, you're wasting your time. And that was the first time I raised my voice. And I said, I will never stop showing up for you, and you will never be a waste of my time. And after I said that, that was the first time he actually let me stay. And that in itself proved to me, that's what he needed to know. He needed to know that he will never be a waste of my time, and he will always be worth it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's so powerful to hear. It's emotional to listen to. I hear, like, I'm getting choked up listening to you tell this story. And, you know, you've always had such a mission, right? With taking your pain into purpose, right? To help others through your stories. At what point did your son decide that that was going to be part of his mission too?
So my son is like, has literally never posted anything on social media. He's like one of those kids that was never, hey, I want to be part of your videos, mom, or I want to be a YouTuber. Never, ever, ever. Super private person. We're driving back from his second residential center that he was in. He's 17 at this point, and it was a 7-hour drive, and we're in the car talking, and he said, you know, mom, what helped me the most through all these years wasn't actually the therapist and like all that stuff was helpful. But what helped me the most was sitting in support groups with other kids and hearing from them, because it made me realize that I'm not some crazy weirdo, like that I'm normal, even though I have depression. And so we start talking about it, and that's when he was like, you know, I'd be open to doing a video, and maybe it'll help, you know, kids to hear from a kid their age. And I waited till he turned 18, and I gave him like more than 10 chances to change his mind. And I would, like, every time I'd get a bad comment, which is all the time on my videos, I would show it to him, be like, okay, see, are you going to be okay if this is what they say under our video? Like, I just really wanted to prep him for it. And he was like, yeah, I'm good. So we made the video. And one thing that I really wasn't well, first I was nervous about it. He said, I don't want you to tell me what you're going to ask me. I don't want to prep for the video at all. I just want to sit and have a candid conversation. And I was like, oh crap, how is this, how is this going to look? And he was just so open. He was so open. And I remember asking him after we were done with the video, I said, how will you feel if people judge you? And without even thinking, he goes, that's on them. And I was like, oh my God, if I had that when I was 18, like it would have saved me from so much. But I never would have written this book without not only his okay, but his input. And so every single chapter, I would sit down with him and I would go, what did you think when I did this? And what were you thinking when this happened? Because I wanted it to be genuine to his story as well. And then he even wrote the last chapter. And we just did the audiobook, and hearing him read the chapter was so emotional for me because he goes there. He does not hold back. You know, he writes about the thoughts he had. He writes about the behavior that came out because of his depression. I mean, he goes there. But towards the end of it, he says, you know, I had some shame about the way I behaved when I was struggling, but I don't have any shame about having depression and having anxiety. And I think that's so important for kids and adults to hear, you know, and he says, like, this isn't something I chose. Why should I have shame about something that is just a part of me and I didn't choose?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm really proud of him. He's so, it's like still kind of surprising to me how open he is. And I kept, like, while I was writing the book, I kept going, okay, so should we maybe not share this part? And he was like, no, write it, write it, write it, write it. Literally, he was like, write all of it.
Wow.
It's pretty amazing. And I definitely think, you know, it's of course easier to see this in retrospect, but as Erica said, and this is part of like her and my Buddhist practice too, this idea of like pain into purpose or poison into medicine is what we call it. And your willingness to be so open, I'm sure, is creating a lot of medicine out there. So thank you for sharing a bit.
So. I want to say one more thing if I can.
Of course.
Yes.
You were talking about control earlier. And I just want to say this because this was, again, another big thing I had to learn. We control because we convince ourselves that that's what a caring, loving, good mother will do. She will try to fix it, right? And what I had to realize is that I cannot control and connect. Can't do both.
Yeah.
Because the minute you try to control, it pulls you from being able to connect. And when I really started noticing a difference with Luca and with our relationship is when my main focus was to connect. Every opportunity, every interaction I have with my child is an opportunity to connect. And when we started connecting, that's when he realized, oh, we're on the same team.
Yeah.
And that's when he became more open. And then it was easier for me to say, hey, are you willing to try this therapist? Are you willing to, if you're just trying to control, all you're going to do is push your loved ones away. And so if you're struggling with control issues, focus all that control on yourself, control yourself, and just know that the connection is what's going to actually lead to healing.
That's so powerful. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I just have one more question before we start to wrap up. And it's about you have 2 other children. And so I am curious too, because I think, you know, I'm sure a lot of parents can relate to this, right? Is like there might be one child in the family who needs more of the attention in the moment or is going through something that requires a lot from the parents. How were you able to deal with that having 3 children? And what was there or how has their experience been through all of this too?
So I thought I was doing a good job. I thought I was doing a good job at a lot of things that I wasn't. I didn't realize I was clueless. I thought I was clueful, but I was not. So I would, you know, check in on my kids, and my little one was really little, but my daughter is 1.5 years younger than Luca. And I would, are you okay? You good? I know this is heavy on our family. Do you need anything? And it was just these little questions, and she would say, okay, and I would believe her. And come to find out she was really struggling. But here's the thing. Her whole life, she was known as the good kid, the easy kid. And the good kids will go out of their way in families to not add any stress. And when she told me she was struggling, and I said, why didn't you tell me earlier? She said, I didn't want to add any stress, Mom. You were already going through so much. So often good kids take one for the team and they suffer in silence, and it can actually be even more dangerous. And so I had to learn again, and I've repeated this like 15 times, but to stand in awe of her story. And so when I realized that, that's when I really had to take the time every week. It's just all you, like we are doing something with just you. And really, again, focusing on not just asking a question, are you doing okay? Because her grades were still great. She was still doing her chores. Her, you know, struggles didn't show up loud like Luca's. So when the loud one, you know, it's so full of aggression, it's very easy for us parents to comfort ourselves with, oh, okay, the other ones are doing fine. Because we don't want, it's too much to think about somebody else needing us, right? So to really connect with her and give her the opportunity and the freedom to just be herself and not have, this is another thing with siblings. When one is struggling, we end up casting that kid as the main character in everybody else's stories. And that's so unfair. That's so unfair. So yeah, I had to learn to really, really spend the time and energy connecting with my other kids throughout this. And by the way, for any parent listening who's going through this, none of this is easy. If you're struggling and you're like, how do I have the time and how do I find the energy? I am telling you, none of it is easy, and I still mess up, and I don't want you to beat yourself up or feel like I don't know how to do this. You're not supposed to know how to do it. None of us are failing, we're learning. So everything I'm saying, I don't want any of it to in any way make anybody feel bad.
Well, thank you. And Erica, I'm glad you touched on that because I was thinking about that too. And I think, so many families, families come in all different shapes and sizes. And they're, like you said, everybody's sort of the main character of their own story. So to be able to just even acknowledge that, I think is like a really powerful tool just to remember. So as we begin to wrap up, we ask our guests 3 wrap-up questions. And I'm curious, nowadays, how do you take care of yourself? Do you have a daily self-care practice or any non-negotiables?
Number 1 would be Paul, my therapist. And I highly recommend any parent going through anything, find time for therapy. And I also I've gotten really good at not feeling guilty taking care of myself, or as I word it, so I never feel guilty, taking care of the most important person in my child's life. And that's me.
Oh, that's so powerful. Thank you for everything you've shared today too. It's so good. The next question we always ask is, what does being courageous mean to you?
I think the bravest thing anybody can do is live authentically. Don't hide, don't compete, don't compare, just live authentically. I've realized that I can choose to be happy, or I can choose to live for other people's approval. I can't have both. I really can't have both. If you're looking for genuine happiness and living at peace. And so the bravest thing you can do is be you, as messy as your story is, as messy as you are, live it. Don't hide it.
Thank you. That's good advice. And then the final question is, of course, in addition to your own book, do you have a book recommendation? It can be on any topic, just something that's meant something to you personally.
So there's a book by Zach Anner, who was born with cerebral palsy, and he's been in a wheelchair his whole life and had a lot of health issues. And he wrote a book, If at Birth You Don't Succeed, which is such a brilliant title. It is funny and it is insightful, and it will leave everybody feeling more empathetic. He is not a parent, but even as a parent, I learned so much. It's a book I would recommend for pretty much any age, starting with like late teens.
Thank you, Christina. And of course, if anybody wants to buy your book, if they don't already follow you, find you, where can they do that?
At Christina with a K, last name Kuzmic. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, everywhere.
Great. Thank you again for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Courageous Wellness. Tune in every Wednesday for a new episode featuring a different guest each week.
Subscribe, rate, and write us a nice review. And you can also follow us on Instagram at Courageous Wellness, or get in touch via our website, www.courageouswellness.net, where you can also find additional info about our health coaching services, virtual group events, newsletter, and more.
Until next week, I'm Allie.
And I'm Erica, and we're Courageous Wellness.